welcome viewers to this series of lectures around the theme local origins of Harappan civilization. Over the last three interactions that we had around this theme, we have already discussed the formative influences of the mature Harappan civilization coming largely from the Mehergarh area and subsequently several other Neolithic complexes that grew in this area, what went on subsequently to become the territory of Harappan civilization in the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent. And in this connection, in the earlier part of this lecture, which is part 3 of this lecture, we have already alluded to the three early Harappan Neolithic cultures from 3200 BCE to 2600 BCE, right at the edge of the mature Harappan civilization, because 2600 BCE onwards is the mature phase of Harappan civilization. So, Kordiji culture, Sothi-Siswal culture and so forth, they are all part of the early Harappan Neolithic complexes. And we have already seen in the earlier part of the lecture as to how some practices that we otherwise know as characteristically mature Harappan phase practices are already there, are already present in the early Neolithic cultures in Sothi-Siswal, in Kotdiji and so forth. Which is, of course, from 2600 BC onwards, part of the mature Harappan civilization. So, carrying forward the same line of discussion, which is in favor of the local origins of Harappan civilization, what we also find from the early Harappan Neolithic complexes of Kotdiji, Sothi-Siswal and so forth is a fact that larger number of sites of larger size and of more permanent nature with respect to the preceding Hakra-ware culture is very much here. That is, if you look at the Hakra-ware culture, which is pre-Harappan Neolithic culture, now in the early Harappan Neolithic culture, that is from 3200 BC onwards, now larger sites are there, larger Neolithic sites are there, which again is testimony to the fact of a successful adaptative strategy. So, it is a kind of linear progression towards something big, which we do get to see in the form of Harappan civilization. So, there are larger number of sites and not only larger number of sites, Neolithic sites, but also the size of these sites is bigger than the preceding Hakra-ware Neolithic cultures. And they are of more permanent nature. How do we know that a site is of more permanent nature? Because the archaeological debris that they leave is thicker. So, any culture living at one particular place for a longer duration of time will generate more garbage, will generate more debris, and that debris, the depth of that debris is testimony to the longer duration of stay of these cultures at a particular place. And since they are now of more permanent nature, obviously they are anticipating something big and magnificent that we get to see from 2600 BC onwards in the form of mature Harappan civilization. Similarly, mud bricks or building houses, except from Kalibangan, where they were perhaps using fired bricks, but otherwise in the early and pre-Harappan Neolithic complexes, the houses were built and they were built of mud bricks. They were sun-dried mud bricks, not fired, but from Kalibangan, we even have the evidence of fired bricks being used in the early Harappan phase, and that's noteworthy. So, in Kotdiji phase, if you look at the site of Harappa, so when we say Kotdiji phase, we are talking of the site Harappa in the period 3200 to 2600 BCE. So, at this time or in this time, Harappa was only of 40 hectares, right, and which is by any standard a big Neolithic site, right? Certainly not as big as it went on to become in the mature phase, but even for a Neolithic site to be of 40 hectares is quite noteworthy. In Sothis wall phase, similarly, Rakhi Garhi also is of 40 hectares. So, when you say Harappa, when you say Rakhi Garhi, these are, we generally tend to understand it as mature Harappan sites, but it is noteworthy that they existed as sites not as expansive and as magnificent as they appear during the mature phase, but even in the Koddizi phase or Sothis wall phase, which is early Harappan phase, prior to 2600 BCE, they did exist as sites, and big sites, 40 hectare sites. There are around 291 early Indus sites, and this is again, if you update the numbers, obviously it would go up, but the data that I am using, it will give you a good sense of proportion. The average size of 291 early Indus sites comes to around 4.5 hectares, and this is an estimate made by Poschel, whose book earlier I have alluded to, and you can do well to read it. So that is the average size of 4.5 hectares that we have of several early Indus sites that we have. And what is noteworthy is that 34 settlements exceeded 10 hectares individual size. So what does it say? That there is great degree of heterogeneity in terms of site size already happening in the Neolithic phase of or the early Harappan Neolithic phase, and this is symptomatic of the critical process of economic and social differentiation that is happening. Otherwise, we tend to believe that Neolithic cultures in general are egalitarian in nature, but there is fair degree of heterogeneity in terms of site size that we get to see, and this could be symptomatic of economic and social differentiation already happening, and we have earlier discussed extensively as to how they are critical to surplus generation and emergence of different classes, some classes having more wealth than others, and how ruling strata could emerge out of several other communities. And this is how perhaps the administrative infrastructure could be financed using those I would say resources that are not very symmetrically distributed or not equally distributed amongst all, and this is how the system of state comes into being and so forth. So that process, which is so critical to coming up of state system, those key processes are already evident in the early Harappan Neolithic complexes. There is no urban revolution as such, but they could be considered coming close to, these sites could be considered coming close to being small townships, because they are using mud bricks. Some of them are using fired mud bricks. Settlement sizes are very heterogeneous. Some are more than 10 hectares, and some of them grand sites, Rakhi Garhi and Harappa, even in the pre-Indus phase, are exceptionally large Neolithic sites. So they cannot be said to be urban sites, but coming very close to it. So that urbanization thing that we tend to understand with reference to mature Harappan civilization is something which is already as a process on in the early Harappan period. Social differentiation, which is yet another critical factor leading to catapulting of a Neolithic culture into Bronze Age civilization stage. So social differentiation was little limited because seals that otherwise are regarded as symbols of ownership in the mature Harappan period are very limited from early Harappan layers. There is no palace as such architecturally. If you look at the findings in the early Harappan Neolithic complexes, there is no evidence of exceptionally large buildings which could be understood as some kind of a palace or something, or monumental buildings. They are very hard to come by, almost not there in the early Harappan layers. So the most that we can safely presume is that at social and political level, these settlements could not have been more than small principalities, and certainly not in the form of a powerful state. So politically, that state structure or architectures usually architectural remains usually associated with state system, they are not there from the early Harappan layers, and this shows that social differentiation is still in its infancy, or it has not reached to that critical level which is so symptomatic of Harappan civilization in its mature phase. So in the earlier discussion, I was telling you about some gaps. So not everything is accounted for only with reference to local factors. So there could be some other reasons, or maybe that we have more evidence subsequently which can fill these gaps. Funerary rites appear to be little different from the mature phase, because if you look at the burial practices in the pre or early Harappan phase, there is no straightforward extended burial during the early Indus phase, which is so characteristic of the mature Harappan phase. So the way funerary rites were carried out in the mature phase, there is some bit of difference, and this again leaves space open for some intrusion, or maybe some other practices becoming more mainstream in the mature period and so forth. But there certainly is some bit of gap. Horned deity on a pot from Kot Diji has been found, and horned deity, all of us know, reminds us of mature Harappan phase, so that's already present in the early Harappan Neolithic period. Similarly, we have finding of bull from Dam Sadat. Again, the moment we say bull, we are reminded of that iconic bull engraved figure on Harappan seal, which is of mature period. Mother goddesses coming from Jalilpur, Gumla, Saraikhola, all these things as motives or as symbolic representations that otherwise is so characteristic of mature Harappan period, they have already been there in the early Indus phase in this area. There is no evidence of writing, and all of us do associate mature Harappan period with writing or presence of scripts that we have not been able to decipher satisfactorily. So local factors cannot account for emergence of writing, but there are some arguments that we will talk about. Because some historians say that writing doesn't take very long to evolve. It's either there, it's invariably sudden. So people get to know about it, a practice begins, and writing doesn't always need to be having very great lineage in order to evolve or something. One of the of the three early Indus cultures, that is Kot Diji, Soti Siswal and Amrinal, only Kot Diji culture survived the onset of Indus civilizational phase in the northwestern frontier province and northwestern Punjab during the 2600 to 2000 BCE period, which is mature Harappan period. Of course, it did take some influence, but there is no evidence of writing as such, or baked bricks, or distinctive pottery and so forth. So writing, while talking of writing, what we need to understand is that the three Neolithic or early Indus Neolithic complexes that we are talking of, it is only Kot Diji which has continuity of settlement with the mature period, and in this we find that there is no evidence of writing coming from this area even in the mature period, right? And they continue to use baked bricks and their own distinctive pottery even in the mature period. So there is that regional prominence evident in the Kot Diji culture, which is early Harappa, even in the mature periods. Of course, some influences did creep in, but largely it was able to retain quite a few early Harappan practices even in the mature phase of Harappan civilization. Similarly, in Baluchistan, we get to see Kuli culture, which is again spoken of with reference to the early Harappan complexes, early Harappan Neolithic complexes present in this area prior to the emergence of the mature phase. There exists a debate between autonomous, slow accretional development and use of force by a small section of society over the rest, and this could have led to emergence of a ruling class and then forcing some changes that we get to see in the mature Harappan period. Archaeological changes not congruous with political, dynastic, human relationship changes. Now, this is an assertion usually made by archaeologists who say that it's not proper to subject archaeological findings with reference to political and dynastic compulsions and so forth. It's not as if that archaeology will always testify, or changing profile of archaeology will always testify to the changing political, dynastic or human relationship transitions. So perhaps they want to assert that we should not subject archaeological findings with questions that are political, that are dynastic in nature and so forth. Archaeology may not always come to one's aid in answering these questions. So archaeological strata sequence has implicit in it the paradigm of gradual change. Now, these are some of the thumb rules with which archaeologists and historians understand things. That if you look at a long surviving archaeological site, obviously, if you are studying it with reference to archaeological sequence or sequence of strata, there is that element of slow incremental change happening in a linear fashion that's very much inbuilt into the paradigm with which we approach archaeological studies in a vertical profile, but that may not tell us the actual story. So these are some of the qualifications that we should always make when we are studying a particular period with reference to its local origin or outside influence having been more crucial in creating formative influence and so forth. And not everything evolves over generations. I just told you about writing that anthropologists and archaeologists believe that writings, everywhere, it just comes. It comes, people start using it, and it's wrong to look for the local lineage of such scripts and so forth. And archaeology may not always give you such answers. Pre-Harappan marks bear some resemblance to mature Harappan script, but scarcity of combination of signs. So there is some assertion with reference to some symbols and marks that are pre-Harappan in nature, and historians try to see it in terms of linearity, that look, there is that symbol which is anticipating what went on to become mature Harappan script and so forth. So there is some kind of some resemblances can be seen, but if you look at the mature Harappan script and combination of signs that were used in mature Harappan script, we have very scarce evidence coming from pre-Harappan marks to validate the point that these marks bear a resemblance to mature Harappan script, or they are anticipating what went on to become mature Harappan script. So this again, linguists, as they say, that writing either exists or it doesn't, and therefore we should not bother much about it. We should not keep looking for anteriority of everything, right? So another question that historians ask with reference to local origin is, can there be a single type site accounting for the origins of Harappan civilization? When we say type site, means one site from where everything can be known, which can tell you the story, right? So if we pose this question to whatever we know of early Harappan or pre-Harappan settlements in Harappan area, well, Mehergarh, Ramandheri, Kotdiji, these cultures can claim towards development of ancestral elements of Harappan civilization. So not all Bronze Age civilizations have the privilege of having very clear type sites, but in Harappan case or Indus Valley civilization, sites which are early Harappan, pre-Harappan, like Mehergarh, Ramandheri, Kotdiji, etc., these sites, these cultures can serve as good candidates for being type sites that can tell us the story of the ancestry of Harappan civilization. Can the presence or absence of individual material culture items, say wells, bricks, use of craft materials, provide key to the origins of Harappan civilization? Now, these are the questions that historians deal with, and they say that one doesn't know that by picking or by singling out some material cultural items and claiming that look, they are already there in the preceding period, can this kind of argument be a sufficient argument for establishing the local nature of the origin of Harappan civilization? These are big questions that we need to deal with. These are logical questions that need to be understood and responded to. The antecedent Sothi Siswal and Kotdiji complex are referred to as the formative early Harappan period, as I just told you, that can we account for the local origin with reference to type sites, and Kotdiji, Sothi Siswal and several other sites I just mentioned. They are there as good type sites. But what do we do with the argument? One doesn't know. What we have done in our discussion is talk about whatever evidence that has come from that, whatever is the semblance of uniformity or some degree of correspondence with the mature period and so forth. So, besides continuities, there also are changes that we get to see around 2600 BCE, right at the cusp of the beginning of the mature period of Harappan civilization. So, it's not as if everything that we know as mature Harappan civilization was anticipated in these periods. There are some new things happening around 2600 BCE. For example, the scale of monumental architecture. As I just discussed, that monuments or big palaces kind of structures are just not there in the preceding period. Similarly, the degree of craft production that we get to see in the mature period is phenomenally high as compared to the craft production that we get to see in the early Harappan period. So there is something new happening around 2600 BCE, and everything is not accounted for by slow, rhythmic, incremental change happening across centuries only in local circumstances. Another good question to ponder about is how this establishment of technological foundations and intensified inter-regional interactions of the preceding period anticipate the phenomena of urbanism. As I said, that urbanism to some extent in terms of the size of some sites like Harappa and several other Rakigadi and so forth, they are big sites, yet they cannot be referred to as urban sites. And urbanism is also about having a different level of technological foundations and different level of intensity in terms of inter-regional interactions. And that level of interaction is just not there in early Harappan cultures. So that is yet another question that we need to ponder around. Historians like Shirin Ratnagar has done analysis of metallurgy across the two periods, and she says that this is very likely to bring out contrast more than continuity. So she pitches in for rupture. She pitches in for something new happening, particularly while studying urbanism. That urbanism that is so characteristic of the mature Harappan civilization could have come on account of factors that are not entirely internal. And this, she says that if you look at the metallurgical operations in the early Indus period and in the mature Indus period, there is some bit of rupture, and that can be studied further. So these are some of the things that we chose to discuss today. There are some aspects of this discussion still left, and I shall try to cover them up in our subsequent interaction. Thank you.